How about a sound check? Kevin, can you hear me? Okay. Okay, and here's Diana. It sounds a little bit, it's a little bit loud, a little bit echoey. Yeah, can we turn down mic 2 just a tiny bit? Yeah, number 2. I just keep on talking there. There we go. Oh, no, it's still a little bit loud. I wonder if,
You want it louder?
no, to kind of go down a little bit, just a tiny bit.
I can, but it's going to be...
It's
How are you?
loud.
Can
It's
you
too
hear
loud,
me?
yes, it's too loud.
It's a little loud.
Oh, okay, good. I can't tell.
So just,
Sound man that can't hear.
yeah, well, it'll be okay.
Okay. How's that?
I think this is better. Is this better? Yep,
How about
okay.
you, Tanya? How is yours, Mike?
Mine is fine.
Yeah, very
Thank you,
different
thank you.
settings.
Well, the gain may be different. How is this? Can you hear through the hearing assisted device when I'm using, when the microphone is on, does it work?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, there we go.
That's the issue.
Well, here we are.
Here we are.
Welcome to week 2 of the 5 hindrances, and we're using some references from the Wizard of Oz to kind of explore the hindrances. So last week we just kind of did an introductory and talked about, just introduced the 5 hindrances, which are, sensual desire, greed, aversion, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and worry, and doubt. And we describe them as energies. So is one way, and we offered a few ways to describe them, but one was as energies. And so if you think about the energy of desire or sensual desire, there's an energy of leaning forward into wanting, right, to pull something to you, versus the energy of aversion and ill will, which is a pushing away, right? There's this backward movement or this shoving away movement. With the energy of sloth and torpor, it's actually a lack of energy, right? Not enough energy to be awake and present. And there's 2 elements of the sloth and torpor. One has to do within the body, and the other has to do within the mind. The next set of hindrances is restlessness and worry, which is too much energy. So it's a body that is moving and agitated and unable to settle, or it's a mind that's worrying and spinning and sort of unable to center and rest. And then there's doubt. And doubt is, it's sort of like it doesn't know what direction to go in, the energy. And so there's a lot of starts and stops, kind of no momentum is really established. There's just not clarity. There's no direction. So that's the hindrances as energy. We also talked about them as veils, things that obscure, things that make it difficult to see clearly. And another offering was as things that hamper our ability to practice, to progress, to be free. So I'm wondering if anyone had any reflections from this week about noticing the hindrances. Were you able to take our invitation to be a little bit more playful with the presence of hindrances instead of kind of feeling burdened by them? Any thoughts, Gus or Kevin? And Jay, you weren't here, but you're welcome to chime in. There's mics if anyone wants to share. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, something that came last week that I keep needing to be reminded of is, there's the hindrance and you see it, and then my usual reaction is a lot of aversion to having, it's like, oh, I see it, oh my God, it shouldn't be there. And so, yeah, I was kind of caught in it a lot for today until a recent sit, and then I was sitting there and we were starting and I was looking at the sheet and I was like, oh yeah, and then relax about it, the feeling of it. So yeah, I'm ready to keep listening.
Great. Thank you, Kevin.
Maybe I'll add, it's so fantastic that you recognize there's the hindrance itself, and then there's our reaction to it. And so often we have aversion to aversion, and then we have aversion to aversion to aversion, and on it goes. But it's really great to notice that we have the hindrances, and then extra is wanting it to not be there. That's fantastic.
So maybe I'll just briefly say a few things about, we're going to move into now tonight talking more about desire and ill will. And so, we kind of are using the reference of The Wizard of Oz, the movie, to kind of bring a playful and energy to it, but also it's an easy reference to sort of exaggerations. It just makes it so easy to see them. So for example, well, first of all, I want to say there's kind of the hindrance of greed and desire, but there's also something called dhammachanda, which is more of a wholesome impulse, a wholesome desire. So we don't want to imply that there's no room or space for desire in our practice. It's actually an important part of the path of practice. Without a desire to be free, we would not practice. And Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz is kind of an example of dhammachanda. She really wants to get home. She wants to, get home, which we'll talk more about what that means. So, but some classic examples, right, are before Dorothy goes to Kansas, or goes to the Oz, she's in Kansas, and she's quite disenchanted with her life. And she sings the song, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, right? And it's like, way up high, there's a land that I heard of in a lullaby, somewhere over...
Don't you want to sing it?
No. I might sing We're Off to See the Wizard, but this one, I don't think so.
You're not going to sing?
No.
Okay.
The sky, over the rainbow, the skies are blue. The dreams you dare to dream really do come true. Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops above the chimney tops. It just kind of goes on, and it's clearly an example of her wanting things to be better, prettier. She has a desire, a sense desire for pleasure. So that's kind of a, more subtle way it shows up. And then when we land in the land of Oz, the Wicked Witch shows up, right? And when she shows up, she says to Dorothy, I want those shoes, And then she says, I'll get those shoes, my pretty, right? In this very wicked way. Later, she even says, so she's wanting, I guess I'm combining, here's the greed. I want those shoes, I want to get them. Later, she then is like threatening bodily harm to get the shoes, the aversion, the ill will follows on the heels of the greed. And then I wanted to sort of talk about the Emerald City itself. So this is the home of the Wizard of Oz. And, it's really seen through rose-colored glasses, by the Munchkins. So they're singing the song. We're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz. We hear he is a whiz of a whiz, if ever a whiz there was. If ever, oh, ever a whiz there was, the Wizard of Oz is one because the wonderful things he does. So there's no content in this. There's nothing really, it's just all this because, right? And then just about the city itself, right? It's full and built on sense desire, right? It's like painted horses, right? It's like everything's green, right? It's just like fancy. The first place they take Dorothy and the friends when they arrive is to this like little fix-it-up factory where they get their hair done, and the scarecrow gets new straw, and the lion gets, detailed. The Tin Man has all his rust removed. So there's an example of where you see, sense desire. Two other things is just to reference the yellow brick road itself. This, it's like, there's often talked about as the gold standard. It's painted gold, right, light gold. And I think it also, for me, represents the momentum of greed, right? There's this momentum of building and moving toward what you want. So then in aversion, we've got that basic wicked witch, right? I'll get you, my pretty. She kidnaps her, tells her she's going to kill her, sets the timer, takes the monkeys and sends the monkeys off to drown Toto in the river, right? I mean, classic, extreme, extreme. On a less extreme, a little bit more subtle, disguised level, I'll bring up the wizard himself, right? It's sort of like aversion or hatred disguised as a promise to help. He sends Dorothy and her friends to the Wicked Witch to get her broom. What? What, and he says, you go do this, bring it back, and I'll give you all what you want. A false promise, sending them into life-threatening situation. He doesn't think they're going to survive. So to me, this is a real example of ill will. So with that, let me turn it over to Diana for the Dharma perspective.
That was fun, Tanya. I don't think I will ever consider this movie the same again, especially when you were the witch. That was very funny. I'm loving this. And I think it's good, right? Because the hindrances, I know for me, I felt like it was a failing. It was something, when I got caught with them, I was thinking like something's wrong with me in the practice. So this is a lot of fun to kind of bring some levity to it. So I'm going to say a few more things, maybe build on some what Tanya said. So just to reiterate, the desire that's being pointed to is not all desire. Of course, right? We need desire when we're hungry. We desire to eat. That's such a natural part of being human. The desire that's being pointed to here is, we could say, sensory desire. So it's the desire to have sense pleasures, things that taste good, smell good, feel good, these types of things. And it's a hindrance when it's getting in the way, when it's hindering. So we don't want to say that, having some pleasurable experience is inherently bad. That's exactly where we don't want to go. It becomes a hindrance when we are thinking that pursuing pleasures, it will be a source of lasting happiness. And then we find ourselves on this hedonic treadmill trying to find the next one, and then the next one, and the next one, and we never get to more freedom. So it's kind of like the opposite of freedom, right, is just pursuing the next sense pleasure. So one thing that we might say then that's so much about Buddhist practice, this whole practice, is to help make this distinction. Okay, so what kind of sensory desire is skillful, helpful, healthy, and what isn't? And often we can't see this distinction when we're in the midst of it, but when the mind starts to settle down a little bit with some meditation and maybe with some of the pointing that Tanya and I are doing, or pointing that you've heard in Dharma talks or read in books or something, can help support that. But to help make this distinction between what is helpful. And so in order to help with this, make the distinction, part of what we need to do is just really get to know desire. This sensory desire, this desire for pleasures with the senses, so that it can stop being a hindrance and that we can understand whether it's helpful or not helpful. So it's part of to experience it, this sensory desires, just a part of the human experience. And instead of thinking okay, this is a problem, I have to do something about it, it can be oh, here's an opportunity for me to learn something. Here's an opportunity for me to see what's my relationship to these desires. Am I holding on and thinking and hoping that, okay, this is going to make me happy? Or are we looking at the objects and getting obsessed with the objects? Okay, look at that. Oh, it's so beautiful. As soon as I have that, it's going to be great. And wow, look at that toaster. As soon as I get the new toaster, making this up, of course, right? Then it's going to make breakfast so much better. And then once I have a good breakfast, then my day is going to be better. And then I can do all this kind of stuff. So I just got to get the right toaster. Not too big, not too small, this type of thing. And we kind of start getting obsessed with the toaster and not even recognizing how much, as Tanya was saying, how we're leaning forward and we're just filled with kind of this desire, we might even say greed, and we're completely detached from our own experience, detached from everything that's going around while we're clicking around on Amazon, looking for the perfect toaster. So, can we experience desire and use it as an opportunity to learn? Notice how we often kind of get obsessed with the object and get disconnected from ourselves. Or notice how we might be projecting onto the object. We're going to think, okay, everything's going to be all right as soon as I get this. We, of course, can say the same with the aversion. Everything's going to be okay as soon as I get rid of this broken toaster that's taking up all this space on my counter, and I don't have room for the blender for my smoothies in the morning, and I have to make all that noise to move it around, and I wake up my partner, right? These things that we do. So there are a few ways that to help, like, well, what is skillful desire? What isn't? And here are some ways to maybe work with this. Does it get in the way? Does it hinder? Does it get in the way of something that's important to you? Get in the way of your meditation practice? Does it get in the way of feeling centered in your body? Does it get in the way to what your priorities are in your life? Sometimes we are so busy pursuing the next dopamine hit or something like that, that we fill our days with that. And the things that are really important to us get neglected. So that's one way. Is it skillful or unskillful? We could ask ourselves, is it getting in the way? Is there something else that we could be doing with our time and our energy? Another thing that we can ask ourselves is that when we finally achieve what we're desiring, when we finally get that new toaster, does it bring the ease that we're expecting? Does it bring the happiness? Does it bring a sense of freedom? Or we just immediately after, oh, okay, now I got the new toaster, it doesn't match the dishwasher, so now I got to get a new dishwasher. You know, of course I'm making this up. But there's a way, right, in which there can just be, we get what we're after, but there's no sense of ease or satisfaction. It's just, like, as I said, kind of like this hedonic treadmill. So that's part of how we can discern is whether it's helpful or not helpful. So part of working with sensory desire is just to recognize it's happening. And then to notice, okay, is this helpful or unhelpful? And then some other things that we can do is to look at what is the experience of desiring. How does that feel? How does it feel in the body? Tanya talked about leaning forward. And I noticed that when I'm talking about desire, I'm talking about toaster, my body, I was automatically going like this. And there's this toaster out there, my body was automatically going forward. Like whether we think about it or not, our body is, often expressing these things. But it can be really helpful to notice what is the bodily experience, because if we pay attention, we'll see that there's a certain amount of contraction or tightness, or there isn't a sense of ease and openness and relaxation. There's a little bit more of a doggedness, like, okay, I gotta get this. There's a certain tightness that's associated with it that often we don't notice because we're paying attention to the object. Oh, look how beautiful it is, those curves, and it's shiny, and it looks so great. Tanya's laughing about the way I'm talking about the toaster. I'm laughing about the way that you're talking about the Wizard of Oz. And this is great, I think, right? The hindrances, right? We need to bring some levity to them. Otherwise, it can feel like, heavy. But so what can we do? Some things also is to maybe, essentially, direct the mind elsewhere, away from that object of desire, one way we can practice just in daily life. And that might be a little bit of distraction in terms of, okay, just what am I doing right now? And can I be embodied and present with what I'm doing? Because sometimes what we're doing is different than the desire. Like what we're doing is we're like trying to find what it is that we're desiring. Here I am leaning my body forward. It's so instead, can we just be present for our experience? But maybe I'm not explaining this well. That maybe like to apply ourselves a little bit more diligently or apply a little bit more energy to what we're doing, maybe that's distinct from the desire. Let's make that distinction. So that maybe if we're standing in the kitchen, just to be standing. If we're putting butter on the toast after it came out of the bad toaster, then we can just like be with that. Maybe I didn't explain that well, but essentially it's kind of like distracting yourself away from the desire and just be with what you're doing. And then something else that we can do as a support for practicing with desire is something that's not so easy to do and really easy to miss, is to notice the sense of ease, spaciousness is there when the desire is gone. And often we won't notice when the desire just goes away, but it might be like 10 minutes, 1 hour, 30 minutes, I don't know how long. Later we're like, oh yeah, I don't have that desire anymore. And then just kind of feel in, oh yeah, there isn't that little sense of urgency or tightness that was associated with it before. The more often we can do this, notice this subtle sense of ease and freedom after the desire has been satisfied, is fantastic. Because once the body and the mind notice, oh yeah, not having it is actually a pleasant state and really supports our being open to what's happening and what we might want to do with our life, then there'll be more inclination to connect with that. But this is not easy. It takes kind of like a commitment or a reminder to notice, oh yeah, I had that desire before and it's not here now. And it's to see the notice of the feeling. So now I'll talk a little bit about kind of like the flip side, so aversion and ill will. First, I'll make a little bit of a distinction between aversion and ill will. Aversion is just kind of like this pushing away, just as Tanya said, like, okay, I don't want this. And then for me, I would say ill will is like, I don't want this, and there's a little flavor of hostility in there, a little flavor of like, dang it, go away, get out of here, something like that, with a little bit of a tone or something like this. So sometimes we might think like anger or resentment or having a grudge or resistance. These types of things are associated with aversion and ill will. And as we talked about earlier, we might even say that fear is here too. That fear is a part of hindrances and ill will. Because sometimes with the ill will is because we are afraid that that's going to be uncomfortable, or we're afraid that it's going to, whatever it is we're afraid of. So we have a certain amount of go away because we think it's going to, we're afraid of it. We don't want it to be around.
Like the Wizard of Oz.
Oh, there you go. Thank you.
Who was afraid of the Wicked Witch coming to the land of Oz, and so it was like, go away, Dorothy.
Thank you, Tanya. You're absolutely right. That's absolutely right. And then, just like I was saying with desire, all turning away or aversion is not bad, right? Of course, it's healthy to have boundaries, to say, okay, this is acceptable, this isn't. I'm willing, this is okay to have in my experience, and this isn't. I'm going to walk away from somebody who's yelling at me. It's inappropriate for them to be treating me that way and to be walking away, right? That's not a hindrance. So it's the same thing to have the sensitivity of, okay, is this skillful or unskillful? Is this helpful or unhelpful? Just in the same way that we do with desire. And in the same way with desire, just to recognize that the role of understanding it requires that we be present when it's there. So to have this, how does it feel in the body? What is the mind doing when we have this sense of aversion? Again, we will feel a certain sense of contraction, and in the same way with desire, I should say, there can be a strong sense of me here and that thing over there, there's a really strong sense that there's these two things, me against the world in some kind of way. So that thing over there, I either want it or I don't want it. And there's a real strong sense of me here. And this can be vague when I'm talking about this, but if you tune in, you can notice that when we're not filled with desire or ill will, that the sense of me being isolated and separate and distinct from everything else isn't so strong. And when that isn't so strong, there's also more ease, more freedom and peace. So one thing that we can also look at for for ill will is to, especially if this is like a habit of ours, is to notice what purpose does it have in our life? What's like underneath fueling it? Some examples might be that we have some beliefs, that we have some beliefs that maybe aren't so clear. For example, I can keep myself safe if I push everything away. That's going to make me uncomfortable. This is a way to make myself safe. Or maybe we can have this, having ill will gives me a sense of vitality. Like when we're really angry or mad and trying to get rid of something, there's a energy that goes through and it feels like we're alive. There's a little bit of drama associated with it, and we feel alive. And we might feel like, if I don't have that, then what would my life feel like? Or maybe we might have another sense of, well, I'm a person that belongs to this group, and this group likes this and doesn't like that, so I don't like that. And I really don't like that because I want to be part of this group. And so it's a way in which our sense of identity can be associated with, having some ill will or some aversion towards something. Maybe the same way with desire too. So just to have some curiosity about what's underneath, what's fueling, and to recognize that there's often some hidden beliefs about it. And then maybe the last thing that I'll say about ill will or aversion is we can actively apply an antidote. And the obvious one is loving kindness. So if you have a loving kindness practice, you can bring it in. I'm not going to go into details about what loving kindness practice is, but I do want to say one thing. I am not talking about having loving kindness for the same thing that we have ill will for. That's a really tall order. What I'm talking about is just changing the ecosystem inside the mind, and to soften and disrupt the momentum. So loving kindness practice is to bring to mind the easiest thing to have loving kindness for. Kittens, puppies, babies, grandkids, pets, this type of thing. Bring those to mind. And you notice how when you bring those to mind, right, then the temperature of the ill will and the aversion can come down. So that's Diana's little desire and aversion, little overview of that. And I'll turn it back to Tanya.
You guys ready to do a practice? Great. So I'll guide you through the practice of RAFT. It's an acronym. I'll tell you what each letter stands for. R is the recognition. A is allowing. F is finding it and feeling it. There's 2 T's. The first is teasing apart, most simply put, what's going on from our reaction to it, but it can be much more complicated. And the last T is finding what we can trust in our practice. So I'll guide you through it, but I just wanted to give you the lay of the land before we start. So taking just a minute to settle in, I'm going to drop in a question for you to kind of just see what answer arrives. And the first thing I want you to do is to notice whenever your answer arrives, if this is something that's just kind of too big to work with right now. And if it is, just ask yourself the question again. Okay? So the question is, what do I think needs to be different in my life right now? So allowing yourself to connect or choose an answer that feels like something that you can work with in this practice, in this room, without getting kind of overwhelmed. So do you all have a sense of something that you think needs to be different in your life right now? It can be very small. Yes? Yes? Great. Yeah? Jay?
I got big ones.
They're all big?
No,
No small?
well, yeah, I got laid off recently, I got health issues, I can go all that. But in the small area, I could say, I'm dealing with quite a bit of restlessness.
Okay.
So, and it hasn't changed the whole time that it was there.
Okay. Great.
Feel the combat and everything else.
Great. Perfect. Okay. All right. So now the first thing to do, so you've got your thing. Now just check in. We're recognizing we want something to be different. Do we want it to be better? So is there some greed present? Do we want it to go away? Is there some aversion present? So is there a leaning in or a pushing away? So just recognize the hindrance or hindrances. Once we've recognized it, if it's permissible to you, we want to allow ourselves to be in the company of the hindrance. To see if we can't turn toward the hindrance itself. And it doesn't mean endorsing it. Doesn't mean, we're going to give in to it. But it does mean we're going to stop fighting with it for a moment. And allow ourselves to kind of turn face to face. And as we do, as we find ourselves turning toward, see if you can shift your awareness into your body. See if you can find and feel where the energy of the hindrance is manifesting in your body. What does it feel like? What part of your body or parts of your body can you notice it in? You might notice it in your throat, your chest, your hands, your shoulders, your neck. You might notice it in your eyebrows and the little squinch between your eyes. Getting quiet enough to be able to receive the sensations in the body, connected to the hindrance. Seeing if you can keep bringing your awareness back to the sensations instead of the story, the ideas. If you have a thought, try and follow them like a vibration into the body. Notice if it's changing. We'll do one of three things, right? Can grow, can diminish, or stay the same. What's happening for you in this moment? breathing, and sensing. Being as simple as we can with the experience. At some point when you're ready, you can move to the next part of the practice. And the simplest part of this teasing apart is to see if you can't first just acknowledge there is the thing that we think needs to be different, whatever it is, and then our reaction to it, and that's the wanting or not wanting, the reaction. For me, I find it very helpful to imagine a very spacious room with a round table and as many chairs as I need. And with each thing that I see as part of this, for example, the thing that I think needs to be different can have a chair, a seat at the table, and my response to it can have another chair. Inviting them to sit down, see them separately. And as you do, you may realize there are some other things that are present here. Perhaps there's an idea, a view, an opinion, a belief that has to do with why you think you need this thing to be different. Maybe there's an imagined future that feels threatened, and it too needs a seat at the table. There could also be memories from the past, the way it used to be, or a different experience altogether that is somehow connected to this one. Allowing everything to have as much space as it needs. Some of these things you may not want to go near, and that's fine. Some of these things you might feel comfortable sitting down next to. Another question you can ask is, what is the purpose of the hindrance here? What is it trying to do? You could also ask, what's feeding or fueling the hindrance? What's keeping it going? And there's no need to create answers. If there's an answer that arises, allow it to have a seat. If not, no problem. We're just trying to untangle, not create more tangles, right? So just simply allowing yourself to acknowledge the different pieces that come to you that are part of the situation. And at some point, if you feel settled, like you're seeing clearly, you can move on to the next part of the practice. This is about trust. What can we trust about our practice? About what we've experienced or seen? What does it feel like to rest in trust? Can we remind ourselves that the hindrance is not who we are? If there's any sense of ease, try to orient toward that ease. Just breathing gently with it. Sometimes if I'm having a hard time resting in a sense of ease or trust, I might remind myself that this experience, the hindrance or whatever's going on, will change. That the way I'm feeling now will change, probably fairly quickly, in some way or another. Sometimes it's really helpful to remind myself that I'm not my experience. I'm not limited by what's happening. It doesn't define me. And that it's nature, really. It's something that comes and goes in all of our minds and hearts. And if it's really hard, I might even put my hand on my heart. Kind of feel the warmth of my hand there. Breathing into my heart. I might say something like, may I be at ease. May I have well-being. May I be safe from harm. So taking a few more minutes to practice in a way that feels supportive for you.
Thank you, Tanya. So Tanya walked us through R, recognize, A, allow, F, feel in the body, T, tease apart with sitting around the table. It was very interesting to have these different ideas sitting around the table. And then to trust, maybe some softening. I don't think you used exactly that word, but, and then even a little bit of loving kindness at the end. So we'd love to hear from you guys. How was that? How was that meditation? Or maybe you have some questions about the hindrances in general, or maybe even the Wizard of Oz. Tanya, maybe I'll just say one tiny thing, that I just imagined you watching this movie with your kids, and it made me just really happy you went during that meditation. So it's very nice.
I thought it was super helpful when you did the table. I was like, I don't know how many chairs I can fill. And then they kept coming and I kept adding chairs. And it was just kind of nice. I sat at the table for a really long time and just recognized.
I don't know if I put it in there, I didn't want to throw in too much, but it can also be helpful to allow the chairs to have relative size. You know, to like, oh, that thing is huge. That thing's kind of small. And then there's the possibility of a whole new set of insights can come.
Yeah, I found myself kept moving over.
Yeah, good, yeah.
Okay, we're here.
Yep, it can be as big as it needs to be, and allowing the space to expand as well. Just if you feel you need more space, it's right there. Yeah.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah, I really appreciated the meditation. I think between the two of you, I was working through some of the stuff you were talking about as you were talking, and then partway through the sit, it kind of just dissolved on its own, and I just stopped paying attention to what you were saying. I was just like appreciating it. So it was really wonderful.
And that was really wise of you, Kevin, to let it just sit, because one thing I didn't mention, but I like to say is, we don't always have to go all the way through. Sometimes it's the simple act of recognition, and that's all that's needed. Like there's almost an instant recognizing and allowing, and it just dissolves. So you only go as far as you need to go, you know, in the practice. Sometimes there's really nothing to tease apart, so you can just, you know, it's just kind of letting yourself rest. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Or maybe it even starts with feeling in the body.
Maybe.
Just like, oh, there's some tightness here. And then there's a recognition, allowing. Or maybe there's just something in the body and then some allowing. So RAFT is nice. I like this idea of a raft that's going to take us over to safety or something like this. But it doesn't have to, we don't have to do that acronym in that order. And I won't say what other words. I have thought of other words that, oh, never mind.
You'll have to tell me later.
Anybody else have a comment or?
So, what if it's something that you've wanted to fix a bunch of times in your life? You have fixed it before, you're looking at it again. How does that change, if anything?
Yeah. Well, I mean, just for tonight, part of it was trying to, could you feel there's what you want to change? Could you feel into just that feeling of wanting to change it?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Great, okay. So part of that tonight was just about like this, trying to get used to and recognize what the hindrance, the not liking or the not wanting or the wanting, right, feels like, the impact of it. So, okay, And to your question, what if you've already changed this thing many times and now you want to change it again? So can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Why are you asking this question?
Partially just
Use the mic.
intellectual interest.
Okay.
Does it change the model at all?
Okay, okay.
Is there an additional insight that comes from thinking about some of these things do recur, right?
Oh, yeah.
And is there wisdom, and when you look at it a second, third, fourth time, is there some additional thing that can be brought to bear? Mostly intellectual interest.
Yeah, well, I would say this is it's not an intellectual practice. It's
No,
a-
my question is, it comes from the
Yeah.
interest. That if you ask me why the question.
Yeah. And so I would say experience it, find out. You know what I mean? Like, because the answer could be there's more, or there's not more. But you wouldn't know that until you did the practice. Does that make sense? Maybe Diana, if you have a response.
Yeah, because maybe if something that's recurring and you've done it before, I would say pay attention to what's fueling it. Why is it recurring? But when I'm saying pay attention, I'm not necessarily saying dig and figure it out. It's maybe like drop in, like what is fueling this? Kind of like this dropping in this question. I'm doing this with my hands because it is more kind of like an opening and like, well, I wonder why this is occurring. So it's a spirit of curiosity as opposed to I got to figure this out. And sometimes when we do that, then something new will bubble up and then we can maybe work with whatever the new thing is. Sometimes if something is repeating, there's a reason and there's something underneath it. So that might be something I could offer.
Okay. All right.
So we might learn something about ourselves, some of our beliefs that we have that are fueling these types of things. And it's these underlying beliefs that are, when we recognize them and allow them to lose some of their authority, this is where real transformation happens. Instead,
For the question. Make room at the table.
yes, thank you. I thought of that too. That's a great idea. Just bring this to the table that I do. Oh, I've done this so many times before. Okay, you get to sit in that chair.
Yeah.
A bigger chair. Okay, so now we'd like to provide an opportunity for you guys to talk to each other and about this. And maybe we'll just have them be in one group together. Yeah. So we'll just, we can go around the circle. You guys will make a little circle, and then just one person will speak while everybody else is listening, and then the next person will go, the next person, the next person. And we'll do 2 questions, and I'll give you one, and then after I give you guys some time, then I do the second one. So maybe spend 2 minutes on your description or of what you're discussing.
2 minutes each?
Yeah, sorry. So the first one is, what role does the pursuit of sensory pleasure or ill will have in your life? Is this something that is a real dominant feature that you're seeing showing up all over the place? Or you're like, no, I'm pretty equanimous most of the time. Or are you finding, yeah, my ill will, my anger gets me into a lot of trouble, or my shopping all the time gets me into trouble or something. You don't have to share your deep, dark secrets, but just this recognition, what role do they have in your life? So,
And I'll just add, they
Yeah.
could be protective roles,
yeah, very nice.
right? It's not just that it gets you in trouble, but it distracts you from something that's difficult, you know? So just to like kind of, because maybe there's a better way to do it, but still it has a role.
Thank you, thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah. And maybe talk about the magnitude, like it's really big or really small or something like this. And then after you guys have been in circle for a little bit, then I'll give you a second question. So if you guys want to sit closer so you don't have to yell across the room.
So 2 minutes per person or 2
Yeah,
minutes per
yeah,
all?
2 minutes per person. Sorry, I didn't make that clear. Okay, you guys finished, we finished around the same time. So here's the second question. What meaningful or satisfying feelings do you have that are not connected to sensory desire or ill will? Like what else in your life, what are alternatives to sensory desire or ill will? What are meaningful or satisfying feelings you have which are not connected to sensory desire or ill will?
One example?
Yeah, generosity, gratitude, love, these types of things. So what are some of the feelings that you have? And we'll just do the same thing going around the circle.
like a museum or something?
In museum or, symphonies, choral work. I actually started singing myself. I joined a chorus and started singing. And that was a purposeful, just do it. Just do it.
No, music is, it's a great door.
It is. For me, it's anything else, actually. And the realization that I didn't have it. I mean, I was just not paying attention to it when it's actually very powerful.
Have you finished? Did you all get a chance to share?
Yeah.
Great. Do you feel like sharing it all about your sharing or meta sharing? Be, what was the value of this time together for you? Any questions?
Maybe I'll start that. I shared with Tanya, like, before I started this practice, I had no idea how much this kind of desire was so much a part of my life. I'm always trying to get the next thing. Whether sometimes it's books or I don't know. It's amazing to see, and how much a habit it is to kind of okay, I want to start a new habit. Okay, well then I must need to buy something in order that I can start a gratitude practice. I need a gratitude journal, or I don't know. I'm just, it's this it's quite something. So with practice, it definitely has lessened, but sometimes I find myself having this. Anybody else want to talk about? You don't have to, as I said, share any deep dark secrets, but what was it like to look at the role of desire and ill will, and then after that to look at, okay, what are some things that are nourishing and supportive that are independent of desire and ill will? How was that? The contrast maybe between the two.
You want me to share?
Yeah. Like your other than desire and
I was talking a lot about how anger and fear are really big for me in my life right now. And often it can feel like a really big chair. So what I do is I find myself sitting on a bench at a park, watching the dogs and the kids and the trees and the birds. You just kind of get lost in the nature of life happening, and it helps me a lot.
Yeah.
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 It's amazing, right? Spending time in nature. It's
Yeah.
really how supportive for whatever is going on. Even when you're really happy, it's nice to be in nature, right? Yeah. Thank you.
I don't,
description was very calming.
Yeah, it was.
Yes.
I had mentioned, I don't know if it's distracting me from dealing with the actual hindrances, but it feels good, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wouldn't worry whether it's distracting you. Sometimes we need to spend time outside, hanging out with trees and dogs and kids.
Well, and by abandoning the hindrances, by picking up the nature, you abandon the hindrance, right? So it's a beautiful thing. It's wise effort. You're redirecting your attention.
Yeah, I found it, yeah, talking about kind of the challenges, and then when you pose the question, what doesn't, I was like, oh, this is great. It was really nice to compare and contrast, I guess, the clinging, the non-clinging, and keep things in perspective. But I also found it really interesting to listen to everyone else, what supports them, and I think I'm going to steal all your guys' things. Hopefully it's given freely. And yeah, and it was also really nice just to be in community.
Yeah.
Do you want to share what was steal-worthy? Is it?
You don't have to attribute it to
yeah.
anybody, but just
So there's, generosity, nature, connecting with the arts, there's creativity,
beautiful.
And actually, Gus did mention you joined the choir. I started taking voice lessons recently, but I just go karaoke by myself. I was like, oh, I think a choir would be, that sounds cool. Yeah, so like joining your voices together, that
Nice.
sounds interesting, yeah.
Fantastic.
One of the things I realized is that sometimes you can get real learning, you're going to recognize the term, from orthogonal sources, right? I mean, not along the path of where you're headed, but things that you normally would not consider. But if you put yourself in those situations and if you are open to that, learning will come in a way that is not predictable a priori, but being in them is very helpful. And that was part of I was just mentioning, I decided a couple months ago that every week I'm going to go do something with the arts, period. Whether I go see a symphony or a museum or whatever, just do something, right? Because in the end, it feeds my soul. This is something I've known all my life, but I haven't done a lot of. And so, no, just go do it. And it may not be directly predictable how that's going to impact me, but it doesn't matter. It is something that when I do it, I feel awe and I feel joy. I feel gratitude, and it's totally separate from the craving and the aversion. Right?
Thank you, Gus.
Nice. Can I come with you? Go to the museums.
Yeah, we can all go together.
You have a really nice story about what you do
Yeah.
every day. If you feel inclined.
We're volunteering.
Okay. Okay, so
Use the mic, will you?
So I realized one of my weak areas of practice was generosity. I could do mindfulness of breath, body scans, all this stuff, but I was not having a regular generosity part, and it was not integrated. And I remember, listening to some Dharma talks, and Gil was talking the emphasis on it, and some examples he gave was great. And I won't go into that, but the point that they wanted me to share is, so I figured out, okay, in my budget, what can I do? So I have some, severe financial limitations, and, in my area, there's a lot of homeless, now it's even really severe. And sometimes even like food they would not take, but I figured out almost everybody would take like a cold soda, Coke. And those are really cheap. If you buy like 3 12-packs, they give you 2 for free in Safeway or something. I can buy like huge amounts, and it's pretty cheap. It's like, 40 cents a can or something. So I store it in the fridge, and every day I'll put 2 in my backpack, and before I come home, they have to be gone. So part of my mind is scanning for, okay, who can I give it, who can I give it? And sometimes it's not necessarily a homeless guy. Some guy, a security guard at the door. Like, just I'll start with friendship and say, hey, you want a soda? And it opens the door to a conversation sometimes, so it's just a bridge sometimes. And sometimes it's, the homeless guys love it's not the Coke even, for them it's like, you see me, They feel so invisible, everybody's walking by nonstop, he's got this thing on, and there's so many homeless, people are also overwhelmed, And just this, even if it's not like $100, it's like, okay, wow, somebody sees me, so. And just in that, I can feel it, because even when he says that God bless you, you can feel the sort of, almost a grief in him of, wanting to be touched and so on. So, it's been an experiment for a few months now, and so far, I'm loving it. I've not stopped, so it's still going well. So it's sort of a budget, within my budget.
Beautiful.
What a great idea.
Beautiful.
What a great idea. I hadn't thought of that. It's such a great idea. And I can imagine, even if you're homeless, maybe you don't have cold drinks very often either.
Exactly,
right?
yeah. I used to just give, regular, and then I realized the cold adds an extra punch to it. They're like, whoa, it's cold.
Yeah.
Very nice.
It reminds me of a practice I did for a while, which was to, literally, when I was approaching a crosswalk or a four-way, really stop early, so that if there was any pedestrians, there was a generosity of space, right? A sense of offering safeness to people. And it would create a connection often, that people would really, like, they kind of would take it in, make eye contact, or I just felt joy because it just felt like a sweet thing to be doing. Yeah. But I think it's nice to be creative about how we are generous with others, because there's what we do with that has to do with objects and money, but there's also what we give with our attention, which you're also describing, right? Giving your attention, acknowledging someone, you know. Yeah, that's great. Well, anything else? This was great. I loved hearing from you guys.
Yeah.
Really, really lovely, really fun. So maybe I'll just do a very brief summary of the key points, and then we'll wrap it up. So I think just the reminder, so you've heard this before, is to invite more of a sense of curiosity, lightness, playfulness when you are working with, experiencing, thinking about the hindrances. Just think about the Wizard of Oz. And remember, we're not saying that all desire is bad, or that all, aversion is bad. Is it hindering? Is it wholesome? Is it skillful? If it's not hindering, just, great. Right? If it's not causing harm, just watch out for your clinging. Watch out for identifying with it, right? So, some of the skillful things are to, if you see, like the most subtle level is you can kind of try and ignore the ill will and just kind of redirect your energy, right? Or your desire, try not to feed it. So just you don't have to give it a ton of attention is one method. Another is to actively redirect your attention, right? Or try and re-engage in a different way that isn't feeding into the desire or aversion. To notice what you're doing that feeds it and stop feeding it if possible. Like, we can, feed aversion if we think that, for example, if we're being critical of something, maybe our boss, who's, and our coworkers appreciate that we're being critical because we're speaking to a problem. Wanting our approval of our coworkers or wanting to advocate for them can be feeding aversion in that situation. So we need to pay attention to what's feeding it, and then make sure we check ourselves and that we're not engaging in things that are causing harm. It's helpful sometimes to kind of pull away or remove things that trigger aversion and desire, like maybe you don't go on Amazon, maybe there's various things that you do to kind of take a break, right, from the normal triggers. And really notice when desire and aversion are present, and then when they're gone. Not just when they're there, but when are they absent? And when they're absent, appreciate what that absence feels like. Usually there's a sense of more being at ease, more being settled. There's not this, and there's not that. It's more, So notice that. Savor it, appreciate it, and try and sustain it. So you might notice then the mind, oh my God, it's so relentless. Pretty soon you can start to feel, and the mind will just offer this next thing you need to go get or do or get rid of. And if you're staying closer to the ease, you can feel the dis-ease that starts to arise with that. And you might say, not now. Not now. All right. Diana, you want to?
I have here my job now is to remind you about the homework. But the homework that I have written down, I don't think is for this
No, I think
hindrance.
those didn't get updated.
So it's on the handout though, right?
Yes, and of course, I only brought one of the two handouts, so, you know.
So I'll just make up some homework.
Great.
I think it could be really helpful to, like before a meditation period, to remember, tap into what you talked about, those things that are supportive, that are not with desire and ill will. Going to the arts, being generous with the homeless, spending time in nature. Just bring those to mind before your meditation period and just see how meditation unfolds. Just like how does that support the maybe some openness or some ease with meditation. So play around with that. Okay, so here we are at the top of the hour. It was great being here with you guys, practicing together, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.